Hi, welcome to the Dog Dave Show. I'm glad you've joined us today. On the show today, we are talking about a topic which is overly overlooked by lots of people, and it's about childhood sexual abuse. And it's quite a complicated case. And to help me disseminate this topic, I brought Kate Motima. Kate, you've got vast experience in this.
Yes,
and I had no choice except to drag you back to the show.
I'm very happy to be back. I was very excited about that.
This is an area you're passionate about. You're passionate about the PTSD, people who've been traumatized in one way or the other. I know you work with the military, you work with other clients, and we won't even mention that. But in particular today, we're talking about childhood sexual abuse. It's a big issue. And from my clinical experience, I see this a lot. And I'm sure from yours, you see a lot. The most difficult thing about this sexual abuse is because it's often unreported. And
Yes.
People come with lots of clinical scenarios, and you look back to their upbringing, you find that, oh, something happened in their childhood. And that leads on to whatever behaviors they're exhibiting. Now, tell us, according to your experience now, we know this happens in women, girls, we're talking about children here. It happens in girls, it happens in boys. And according to your statistics, you're telling me off camera, that's
Yes.
yeah, from various research you've
It
read.
depends which sources you look at.
That's
I
right.
have heard it's 1 in 5 girls. I've also heard it's 1 in 3 girls. But as you said before, it depends on the reporting. It's very, very difficult thing to report. And 1 in 7 boys as well. The boys are not immune to this. The abuser can be male, female, and usually sadly related to the child.
That's right, that's right. So you are talking about the family environment
Yes.
at this stage. So what predisposes the child to be abused? Are you looking at the family environment?
Well, there's an awful lot of factors. The child can quite often feel unsafe to actually say anything. So it's in some parenting environments where there's domestic violence, where there's drug use, where there's alcohol use, where the parent has got a lot of other things to think about and juggle, and quite often it's not, she has to keep or he has to keep themselves safe. And if their attention is in some way divided, sometimes they can lose track of what's happening with their child. That connection is broken. So sometimes the child is in vulnerable situations, something can happen to the child, and then because mum or dad is often not available, not emotionally available, it's hard to keep the child safe, hard for the child to keep themselves safe, and also hard for the child to actually say anything to their parent, because it's like, well, you're always busy with your drugs or your other friends and you don't actually have time for me, which is a little bit sad.
Right, that's right. So we kind of talk about in busy family environment. Yeah.
Busy and distracted.
Distracted family
where the
environment.
morality is already a little bit not what we would normally find. That it's okay to do things like taking drugs, it's okay to do things like domestic violence is a little bit more okay in some families.
Yes.
And that questions the morality of what's okay and what's not okay.
And you said drug and alcohol usually is a prominent feature in this environment.
It's a very prominent feature,
Yeah,
from
yeah.
my experience in this environment, yes.
That's right. And also parenting issues, poor parenting issues. You're saying the parents are not there for the child.
Yes.
And therefore the child is vulnerable to all these, to these individuals, and the child has got no one to lay the head on, for support, and therefore the child becomes vulnerable. And
I think any child becomes vulnerable if they don't have a trusting relationship with their parent, and that's formed from hours and hours, as you know, you're a parent yourself, of sitting and talking with the child and spending time with the child and building that bond of trust.
Right.
If you're too worried about keeping yourself safe, or you're involved in some drugs or something like that, it's very, very difficult to actually form that relationship, that trusting relationship with the child. So then you can lose touch of what's happening for the child,
Yes.
who their friends are, where they're sleeping, what's happening for them.
And looking at the shape of the perpetrators, I know it's difficult to profile them. We talked about that off camera as well. And these perpetrators tend to be relatives in particular.
Most of the time. Yeah,
times.
99% of cases actually. Either a relative or a trusted adult, like a sports coach or teacher or something like that.
A teacher as well?
Yeah, I've dealt with teachers who've been abusing children. Absolutely.
And these are people of position of trust.
Yes, and they have to be, because in order to get to the child, the person has to be in a position of trust. And we can get into the whole debate of priests and religious leaders, but there's, as you say, there's no profile.
Yes.
The only things that the perpetrators I've dealt with have in common are that they're normally very unassuming people, very, very trustworthy people, very friendly, and very charismatic. So the child trusts them.
So apart from the relatives and the close acquaintances, if we can call them, any other vulnerabilities, any other perpetrator profiles, features to watch for?
Quite a lot. You'll find that there's some sort of tragedy or trauma or something in the perpetrator's own background. So they may have been abused themselves, but it's not always the case. Something that already helps them, makes them question the morality of what's right and what's wrong. That this is not okay to do, this is okay to do. And sometimes I guess, there's also pervasively a lack of personal responsibility. So I've talked to a lot of perpetrators that will say, well, she asked me to, or she didn't stop me, or he didn't stop me.
She's a child.
But yeah, exactly. So a child who's been taught to respect elders or feels uncomfortable or vulnerable is going to have great difficulty saying, no, stop that, I don't want you to do that. And also, I guess, because we've talked about quite often the perpetrator is a trusted adult, it's often somebody the child loves. So if I love this person who's doing these terrible things to me, I might love them, I might want them to be happy, and so I'm going to have difficulty saying no.
And that could go on for years and years.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And talking about the long-term impact of all that trauma, it's a traumatic event, obviously, or events basically happening to the child. They got long-term consequences psychologically. There's a biopsychosocial model explaining this anyway. We are talking about, long-term depression, anxiety. We've talked about trust, lack of trust. They can't trust anybody as they get older into adulthood, and they find it hard to make relationships, functional relationships. Let's say they get married or they're in an association, they can't make those functional relationships in the future. What are the features that you see in long term?
A self-confidence.
Self-confidence. Yeah.
And a lack of trust in themselves. So you're absolutely right about the relationships type of situation. Sex is something that an abused child always sees quite differently to somebody who hasn't been abused. Well, naturally, that would have to be the case. And it can go in lots of different directions. There's no particular way of saying that. But a lack of ability to trust somebody enough to have a long-term relationship with them. And that has impacts on sharing finances, that has impacts on sharing holidays, sharing parenting, trusting anybody with anything that's important to you, including your own identity.
Yes. And so there's another issue of stigmatization as well. They're labeled, they're abused, and they become vulnerable to future abuses. They can still be abused from any environment. It could be in a workplace relationship because they are vulnerable.
Yes.
They got low self-esteem, they haven't got that confidence you're talking about. They can't stand for themselves as individuals.
That's right.
And there's also that feeling of guilt. They're blaming themselves for whatever happened in the past. They self-blame and they go into such behaviors like self-mutilation and hating themselves. And hurt people.
Hurt people.
That's right.
That's right.
So when they become parents themselves, they may do the same thing to their children, is that right?
Not always, but sometimes.
Sometimes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'd really like to talk about what you just said in terms of blame, self-blame, guilt, all sorts of different things. Self-blame is actually, strangely, quite a functional way for our brain to try and deal with what's happened to us, because if in some way I can find that I was even slightly responsible for this, if a person or a child or a parent of a child who's been abused can somehow find, well, if only I hadn't done this, if only I had done this, in some ways that actually increases the control that they feel they have over the environment. And if you increase control over the environment, you can increase predictability. If you increase predictability, you have a better chance of keeping your child safe. So quite often I might try and blame myself, if only I'd kept a closer eye on my child, because some of the children who've been abused are children of very, very good parents who keep an eye on their children the whole time. But you cannot be staring at your child 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for their whole life.
That's right.
So some of the children who have been hurt come from very good, very functional families. They're just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's right.
So a parent can blame themselves, if only I'd kept a better eye, if only I'd done this, and it's a desperate attempt to control.
In terms of depression and stuff, do you see that a lot as well? Long-term depression,
Absolutely.
depressive disorders? Yes.
From the child and also in the parents. So because the depression is all about lack of control, as you know.
Yeah.
If I feel that my world is predictable, I feel that my world is hopeless, particularly in what you were saying before in terms of repeat abuses, even if that's being more vulnerable to or more sensitive to bullying in the workplace, or more sensitive to physical abuse, something going wrong, thinking, well, you know, obviously I deserve this because this is who I am in my life.
That's right.
Which is incredibly sad.
And we thank God that we got people like you who are so passionate about this. And I was reading literature, there's so much literature around this topic. And everybody is advocating for more research in terms of profiling the perpetrators, where they're coming from. These kind of people who cause these abuses. There's so much research going on. And we thank you for that, for that opportunity, for that passion anyway. Now, what advice can you give to a child? You know, they're saying most of the abused children are under 13. They're the most vulnerable group, under 13s. But now we got smart kids around here. They're always on iPads, iPhones, you name it. You know, how can you explain to them to seek help? You know, something is happening. They've normalized the abnormal. Something is happening to them right now, and
yes,
they haven't opened up to anybody. How can you encourage that child who's watching or who bumps into the shore and say, oh, what's this?
Well, I think
what's the take-home message for the child?
The take-home message for the child is that it's absolutely okay and you must speak up, because if you don't speak up, this might be happening to other children.
Yes.
And you are very, very precious and vulnerable, and incredibly important that we keep you safe. That's the impression the take-home message I've drummed into my own children and grandchildren.
Yes.
The most important thing in the world to me is your safety.
Yeah.
So what I normally teach children in protective behaviours is that it is absolutely okay to say no, even if you've been told that you have to respect what an adult is telling you. If it feels wrong, say so. I get the kids to have 5 people that they trust. It may be if mum is busy, or if Auntie Fred doesn't believe you, or if grandma's not available, then maybe you could go and talk to a police officer, maybe you could talk to a trusted teacher, maybe you could talk to a sports coach. But the main message is keep talking, because it's most important that you say, I'm not feeling safe. I want you to help me feel safe. And the most important thing for the adult that is being told about this, the 3 most important words, as we were talking about off camera, very valuable words to a child, is I believe you.
Yes.
Even if it sounds like it's something you don't want to believe, you don't want to hear, I believe you. It's so important.
That's what happens. Most of the children, they approach, they trust somebody, and they actually become victimized for that. Say, no, you can't blame Uncle John, is good, Uncle Peter, no, you can't do that, whatever. And now the child has got nowhere to go. It's caught up in between a hard place and the rock. You know, they're stuck, and they're just in their emotional sphere.
Yes.
Yeah, so they need that leeway, somebody to talk to. It could be a friend.
Keep talking.
It could be a friend. And as long as you talk to somebody, that's the main thing. Yeah, that's the main thing. How about the parents? What can they, the parents are living, innocently, like you're saying, they're good parents. What features can they look at to say, oh, there's something wrong with my daughter or something wrong with my son? What are the things they can look for?
Any
can raise
behaviour
suspicions?
change, anything that changes suddenly. So if a normally outgoing child becomes very, very shy and reserved, can, not always, but can mean there's something going on for that child. Or the opposite, if a normally very, very shy, reserved child suddenly becomes extroverted and talking to people. Highly sexualized behaviour, like if they are wanting to dress up or wanting to sit on adults' laps, inappropriate touching of adults and other children. So sometimes if something is happening to a child, they might try that out on another child in the daycare playground or the school playground, because they want to find out, this feels wrong, is it really wrong? So sexualized behaviour, any behaviour changes, any big swings of emotion. But to put that into context, behaviour changes and big swings of emotion are very normal in children.
Yes, that's common.
But anything that makes you think, hey, wait a minute, that is totally out of character for this child, will possibly mean that something is going on.
Something's going on.
Yeah,
It's
something.
worth looking into.
Yeah.
That's good, that's good. And okay, they come to you for help, and you are available all the time. Yeah.
I try to be.
We got Kate's contacts, yeah. We'll put them on the screen, right? Yeah, now because now we got all these technological capabilities, you know, like Skype, you know, Zoom, whatever. So you can do basically counseling with anybody.
Yes, indeed.
Anywhere,
Yeah.
pretty much all over the world, yeah.
Of course.
And this show is shown everywhere, anyway. Yeah. So Kate is available. We say that Kate is available. If you need some help or talk to your healthcare provider and to get the ball rolling wherever you are in the country, you know, all over the world, and get some help. The help is there. And the same thing applies to adults now who have been abused in the past.
Absolutely.
You still need to go through that healing process. Even though you put it on the carpet, you have to put it on the carpet, but it will still come up eventually. It's still running in your emotions all the time.
It's going to affect you until you deal with it,
So you need to deal with it and get some help. And anything else you want to tell us, Kate?
Well, I think it's so important for people to realise if something, I know I've said it before, but if something feels wrong, it usually means it's wrong. Because a lot of people, whether they've been abused as children or whether they're still children, have difficulty, they've told me they have difficulty believing that that's not normal. Doesn't that happen to every child?
That's right.
And sometimes it's only when they go for their first sleepover with their friends that they realise, hey, wait a minute, this is not happening to everybody else. This doesn't feel right.
That's right.
So to keep talking to parents, to keep talking to your child and saying, if it feels wrong, say something. It's okay to say no. You must speak up. And the whole your body is your body, the whole protective behaviours. There are lots of great websites on protective behaviours.
Yes, and nobody should touch you, you know, in wrong places and stuff.
Yeah, this is my body. Nobody has the right to touch it unless I say they can.
That's good. Yeah, thank you so much, Kate, for coming to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure having you on the Doc Dave Show. Like we say every time, keep safe, keep well, and God bless you.